Good evening. I hope that the past week our tefillas are making their headway in Shemayim for Klal Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, that every single minute of every hour of each and every day is a sakana for the tzibur, for each and every yochid, and of course our acknowledgement and appreciation to Torah Any Times for carrying the Dvar Hashem and so many locales, so many stations, so many venues. And we, of course, in our tefillas, everyone has this one, that one in mind. We have Rafael Chaim Meir ben Sima Chasya and Usher ben Rachel, as two of the many individuals that the lists of Tillim go around, and that we hope that we should have good news on every front that we're davening for quickly and speedily. This week's parsha is Parshas Chayei, and we know that the last Sedra, Vayera, ended and concluded with the Akedah. Most say that the Akedah took place on Yom Kippur, and that Avram Avinu, when he went to the Akedah, it took 3 days, and that when he came home, it took 3 days to get back. Now, Avram Avinu got the news that Nebuchadnezzar Imenu was nifter. And he got home, it was right before Erev Sukkot. And the question asked by everyone is, why is there a small chof? V'livkosa, vayavo Avram lispod lisora v'livkosa. Now if you take out the chof, it spells ulevita, that they had a daughter that also there was bad news about. But the Meforshim basically say that we know that if someone lo aleinu lo aleichem loses a relative that they have to sit shiva for, so when it comes regel, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that, because they're all diaraisa, that it's mevatel the shiva. So if somebody lo aleinu lo aleichem erev sukkos heard in the morning that a mother or a father died, and they went and had the burial before Yom Tov, and in the cemetery they sit shiva for a half an hour, and then they go home for Yom Tov, there's no more shiva, because the shiva began and the regel cuts off the shiva. If they were after the shiva and a regel, a Yom Tov came, it cuts off the shloishim, because we know that for a brother, a sister, again 100 times lo aleinu, lo aleichem, a brother or a sister, we sit shiva, we are avelim for 30 days. Only a father and a mother is for an entire year. And Avram Avinu came home Erev Sukkot and buried Sarah, and therefore there was very little time for Shiva, the hour or two. And that's why there's a small chaf, kosa, and to eulogize and to cry for her. The Shiva was over shortly, so therefore there's a small chaf, that it was not the full crying. There was a intermedium of Yom Tiv that cut it off, and therefore it was much, much less. Now, on that, Meforshim speak about the fact that and Rabbeinu Yoina, who was a very exalted Rishon, who lived around 750 years ago, he took exception with the opinion of many other Rishonim who say that the final of the 10 nisyonis, the tests of Avram Avinu, the final one was the Akedah. But Rabbeinu Yoina holds that the final test was not the Akedah. That was only the 9th test. But the final test was hearing the news that Sarah Imenu passed on. And the Sultan wanted, as Chazal say, the Sultan came and whispered in her ear and said, the Medrash says, that he whispered in her ear, do you know where your husband Avram Avinu is? And he continued, he said, he just took your son and the knife is on the neck of your son. And she died. She was nifter from the shock of the news. Now when Avram Avinu, after this test, and the Sultan, as Rav Aaron Kotler, Zechrona Livracha, always used to say, I heard him on a few occasions, that we see after the Akedah, Avram Avinu wanted to take the aisle and shecht it and give it as a korban. But he first had to untangle the brush. Everything was stuck in the bushes, and he had to untangle it. And it was only because the Sultan wanted desperately to frustrate Avram Avinu and make him sorry for what he did. Like the ultimate of the ultimate, we know the Akedah is the cementing factor of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Zachor, Avram V'Akedas Yitzchak. We keep talking about the Akedah, and that the Akedah should stand for us as a factor in our survival of the year. But the Gemara says that if somebody does a mitzvah, he has tremendous schar. And if he does an Aveira, the Aveira does not take away the schar of the mitzvah that he did. Because there's two separate columns. There's the column of the schusim, and there's the column of the schar, of the reward. And one does not detract or add on to the other. But there's one exception. If a person does a tremendous mitzvah, and while he's doing the mitzvah, he feels happy about it, that Baruch Hashem, he's giving a nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if, let's say, he gave a tremendous amount of money to tzedakah, and then 2 years later, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, he loses his money. If he ever says, "Oy, 2 years ago I gave so much away. Maybe I shouldn't have been so free with what I was giving and how much I was giving," he loses the schus. He loses the schus, and he remains without the money and without the schus of everything that he did. That's called in the Gemara, Atoyala ala rishonos. He's sorry, he regrets what he did. The Sultan was dying to get Avram Avinu to regret what he did. And he wanted to say, I was ready to shecht my son, and this is the thank you that I get. I come home to my wife's levaya. And then he would have lost the schus, and Klal Yisrael, Li'olam Voed, could never mention the Akedah. And he tried and twisted, and that's why he put the ram into the brush, that he couldn't get it out so easy. He wanted desperately to frustrate him and to throw up his hands. But it never happened. So Rabbeinu Yoina says that the greatest test was after the Akedah, receiving the news of Sarah Imenu's Petira, and facing the reality that he has to now bury her. But he never lost the schus. And we know that he came into Sukkot, and Sukkot, the essence, there were many tzaddikim that people had tsaros, and they came to tzaddikim, and the tzaddikim talked about the simcha of Sukkot, and that could be the redeeming factor. Because simcha can undo the biggest tzara that a person has. And that's why the Torah 3 times, V'samachta b'chagecha v'yisach sameach u'smachtem lefnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yomim. The Vayavo Avram lispod l'sarv livkosa, so he came back with a tremendous schos, finds out that his wife was died, and had to go into Sukkot, which is the simcha of Sukkot, is the whole basis of Klal Yisrael, that Sukkot is the send-off of Yaakov Avinu, who corresponds to the Yom Tov Sukkot, Liolam Voed, after the 3 Avos, and going into the Yemei HaGolus for 2,000 years. So Avram Avinu, the Sfarim say, that despite everything that happened, and he had to be maspid, when it came to Sukkot, he was able to pull himself out and to have Sukkot in its full flourish and glory with total simcha. Now, we know that when we come to the beginning of the Sedra is called Chayei Sorah, the life of sorrow, but it was not the life of sorrow, because it began about the fact that she was niftered, she died. Vayihi yemei Chayei Sorah, me'ah shana v'esrim shana v'sheva shanim shnei Chayei Sorah. The life of sorrow, the life of sorrow, the life of sorrow. And why does it have to say in the beginning Chayei Sorah and end the pasuk with the words Chayei Sorah? It just said Chayei Sorah. And the end of the Sedra is about Avram Avinu being nifter. So it begins with Petira and it ends with Petira, but yet the name of the Sedra is the life of sorrow. Because the message that the Meforshim say, and Kadmoinim ask this question, and they say that it's true that she died, but the impact of her life and her husband Avram Avinu's life was so deeply rooted into Klal Yisrael that it remained the role model and the complete projection for every Yiddish family, li'olam voed, till Mashiach will come, and after. So when we say Chayei Sorah, and that's what they say, why it repeats Chayei Sorah, because it wasn't that we're leaving off her life of how long she lived, because Shnei Chayei Sorah, that Sorah lived on in every Yiddish heart and every neshama forever, because it was done with such intent and with such mesiras nefesh that it was able to have its everlasting effect for Klal Yisrael. Now the Medrash says that she lived, the Pasuk says she lived 127 years. And the Medrash says that her effect and that she reigned, she was like the queen on the whole world. In other words, it wasn't just that the people of the world looked at her like some honorary, beloved hero, but they stood to attention when they spoke of her and when they thought of her and when they saw her passing in a caravan. that there was an indelible imprint on their lives that took place. And therefore the Medrash says that Esther Hamalka, was able to benefit by the fact that Sarah Imenu reigned and was considered majesty for the world. She inherited the right to become queen over 127 Medinas, the 127 years and the 127 Medinas. Now, it's a nice thing, 127 and 127. But if we zero in for a moment and think about the fact, it says that Sarah, that she was able to reign over the whole world. Now, we really see the picture drawn by the Torah. The Melech Mitzrayim took a hold of her, seized her, the Paro, she didn't have a child till she was 90. She didn't have a bed of roses. She had a very tough life. And it seems that circumstances overwhelmed her, but she was not overcome by the challenges of those circumstances. And the reason that Esther is compared to her is because, yes, they both had Esther was a Yesoima. She grew up in the house of Mordechai. Even when it came to the big miracle after Klal Yisrael fasted, it says in Medrash that to get to Achash, she said a message to Mordechai that, that somebody who's not called to the king and goes in to speak to the king is killed on the spot. So she said, fast for me 3 days. Everyone fasted and davened, and it was even Pesach. We didn't have the Seder. We didn't have matzah that year. We didn't have moror. We didn't have any of these mitzvahs that we normally have because everyone was fasting for her success and that she should be saved. She shouldn't be killed. But there were miracles on top of miracles. As she was coming, it says there were 10 chambers to get to Achashverosh. So she went into the first chamber, and she went to the second, and she went to the third, and she went to the fourth. From where Achashverosh was sitting, he could see into the fourth chamber. That was before coming to the other 6 chambers, 10 chambers she had to go through to get to Achashverosh. That he saw her already in the fourth, and he said to his servants, is she out of her mind? Doesn't she know that she's killed on the spot if I'm not in the mood to see her? So there were tremendous, tremendous miracles that were bestowed on Esther to save her life and to make her mission successful, which ended up like that. And it remained for us a Yom Tov, that every Yom Tov will change its surah, Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Yom Kippur, but not Purim. Because Purim, the source is so high that it's the only Yom Tov that she wrote to the Anshe Knesses Hagdola, Kisvuni Ledoros, Kavuni Ledoros. That means there were certain things that Shlomo HaMelech wrote Koheles, Yirmiyahu wrote Rus, that became part of the Kisvuni, became part of our written, that we lane and the Chof Daled Kisvei Kodesh. But no one said Kavuni Ledoros. That was from the Torah, that there's a Pesach in that. And it was so high that she was able to ask Kavuni. And we have the Yom Tov of Purim that we eat, and we read the Megillah, and we do all of these things that happen on Purim because of the level of what it was. But still, every minute was a sakona. So the point that the Meforshim on the Medrash say is this whole comparison of Sarah and Esther was not that they had easy lives and that they were sitting on thrones, queens, and And it was just a very big one lineup of majesty. But it was the fact that they were so troubled and tested, and they didn't give in an inch for what they thought was the right thing. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avram Avinu that he was complaining that Sarah wants me to kick out Hagar from the house with Yishmael. And Hashem said, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shema b'kola. You listen to Sarah, whatever she says to you. Now Sarah answered and said, yes, you have a son, but he's going to be a very bad influence on my Yitzchak, so he's got to go. And there was no more question. He was sent out. Hagar with Yishmael. But that's what the Medrash wants to stress. That yes, they did have humbling and difficult and tremendous tests which came their way, but they were unflinching in the response in their life, that they knew there was a purpose and a goal, and that they had to focus on that, and every detour and every distraction along the way was not going to detour them off the road of what they had in a life's mission. And that was the comparison between Sarah and Esther, who both were in that same category and never ever deviated or had the remorse or regret for anything, but just looked forward. Now, we know that when Avram Avinu went to buy a plot, and there's such a thing as a kinyan, and that's the reason why David insisted from the Chiti to buy Yerushalayim, and that there were many cases, and Avram Avinu over here insisted on buying. Avram Avinu could have said, listen, this land was given to me by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't have to debate with you and I don't have to beg you, I can just take it. But there's an inyan of a kinyan, the same way when a man marries a wife, that it's not just because she's maskim and he's maskim and they get married, but there has to be a kinyan because in Olam Hazeh, to possess and to be able to have the shaychus, v'davak be'ishto, that which the Torah commands, that there be dveikus at every level, with a wife and with a relationship and with a kinyan of karka. When we make a cemetery, for instance, we cannot just buy a piece of land and say, well, this is going to be a cemetery. You have to take a minyan of people who have to fast, and they have to walk around the land the whole day saying different tillim and different other, a pisman for this, a pisman for that, that there's a whole seder that we have to be, it's called being Makadish the Karka, that there has to be a revolution and a transformation from just being a grouping of earth to something to receive the body that's going to come through that earth for Tchias HaMesim. So Avram Avinu was intent to be able to buy, and Ephraim thought that he was fooling him, and he was, you look at the psukim, he seems like a very nice guy. No problem, no problem. And you look at the Medrash, that every twist of every word was how much more money could he grab. And that's the reason that the first time that Ephraim's name is mentioned, it's spelled with a vav. But as it goes on in the psukim, it's without a vav. Because the Mefarshim say that his whole kavanah purely was not to be the nice guy, but Ephraim wanted the money. And someone who overindulges always remains a chosser. It's never enough. Because he gets this, then he wants that. And then when he wants that, he wants the next thing. Because overindulging causes that relentless desire for more. And that's why that as tzaddikim used to be happy, and they exuded such happiness because whatever they had in terms of their life, their ruchnius, their gashmius, everything, there was such satisfaction that it was a matana from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they were able to go on, that they lived long lives. You see the last 10 tzaddikim that died in Eretz Yisrael, every one of them lived into their 90s, and some of them to their hundreds. Why? They were not richer. They were besieged every day with 100 problems from all sides. But there was an inner glow of simcha, and that permeated their minds, their neshamas, and they were mashpia with that happiness and gladness of heart, that they were able to have that unbelievable result come out in the flourish of their brachas and their meetings. Even somebody went in for just a meeting for 10 minutes to meet with one of these tzaddikim. They left elated, they left imbued, they left on a high, because that level of Shechina and Simcha was imparted to the person that they were meeting with. And Avram Avinu knew that he had to come to terms with him, so he let him play around with him. Avram Avinu knew exactly what was and what it was all about. And that's why when it says that he came, so the Medrash is troubled by the word Vayavo, he came. So the Medrash answers he came from Har HaMoriah. And we all know that he was coming from Har HaMoriah. So what do we have to say that for? He was coming from the Akedah. But he knew that overall, all of these difficulties, from Yom Kippur, the Akedah, to Sukkot, the Simcha of Sukkot, that he had to hear the news of the Petira of Sarah, and then he had to deal with the Kvura with Ephron, and he had to come in 2 hours later to Sukkot. Out of that ambush of the Satan to drag him down and propel him into the level of complete simcha. Now, Eliezer, we really find, is a very interesting person, because as all of you either remember or have learned at one point, know that Eliezer was told by Avram to swear that he would never do a shidduch for his son Yitzchak with the Benos HaKnani. But he wanted him, ki im el artzi, he wanted him to go back to where the family was from. Who was the family? It was Besuel, and it was Lavan. What? These were two tzaddikim? These were two Rishoyim, they were oivdei avodah zarah. So what was the tremendous Maila? But as the Chazal explain, Avram Avinu in Eretz Yisrael saw that the DNA of the Canaanim, it was rotten. There was something at the source, at the root of their mahus, that there was something lacking in the Amud HaChesed. Goodness, that the feeling for others and the true sentiment lacked a base of sincerity. So it's true that Basul and Lavan were both Ovdei Avodah Zarah. And so were the Canaanim. But it wasn't for that reason, because they over there were busy Ovdei Avodah Zarah. But it was because of the lack of the koyach and the yesod of the midas. He wanted that the generations that would come from Yitzchak, from him and then from Yitzchak, should be pure in intention and pure in motive in how they deal with other people. He wasn't sending for someone that was wealthy. He wasn't sending someone that was powerful. He wanted quality, midos, and characteristics, that there be pure character. And that's why when the Medrash talks about Eliezer, first we see that Avram Avinu asked him to swear. Now the pasuk first says that Eliezer hamoshel b'chol asher lo. That means Avram Avinu became a fabulously wealthy man. And he gave everything over to Eliezer. He trusted him without a question. He never asked him to swear that he was going to watch his flock, watch his silver, his gold. Well, when it came to the mission of going to find a shidduch for his son, then he said, I want you to swear. And because that is nitzchias. The Gashmias, he wasn't worried. He trusted him and he felt that that was enough. But when it came to the nitzchias of what was going to become a Klal Yisrael, there had to be good midos, good character. And when we see someone that is a good person, we come to appreciate them. Regardless if they're poor or they're rich or they're famous or they're not famous, whatever they are, the mere fact that they're such a good person, that overrides every other consideration, and the person comes forth with a blossoming, beautiful personality, and all come to love that person because of the personality. But Eliezer himself was from Chum. He was cursed. Chum, we know, was one of the three sons of Noach. And after they came off the Teva, that Chum behaved very despicably with his father, and he didn't want his father to have any more children, and he took terrible action. And when Noach woke up, he realized what his son did, and he cursed him. And Eliezer came out. Some say he was even a son of Chum. Other Meforshim say it was a great-grandson, but he was definitely from that lineage. And that's why when he wanted that his daughter should become the wife of Yitzchak, Avram said to him, listen, I am blessed and you're cursed. It doesn't go. It's not a match. What was the Havamina of Eliezer when he first brought up the topic with Avram? He knew he was from cursed lineage. He was faithful, and he was unbelievably loyal to Avram Avinu. That Zakan Beso, his chief of staff, he was his Neman. He was his complete, he put his trust in terms of a worker or an assistant. Complete. What was going through the mind of Eliezer that he still had that wish and was hoping that Ulai, maybe, Ulai, and Rashi says, Ulai is spelled without a vav, Eli ksiv, he still wanted his daughter for Yitzchak. It was lingering through his mind. And the answer is, say Kadmonim, that Eliezer when he met Rivka and he realized from the chesed she was doing, not just giving them water, but the flock and running and overflow and more, that this was the shidduch for Yitzchak, he had an unbelievable level of simcha that he succeeded. And the Torah went through 10 psukim of the story and then goes and repeats it. Many times there's one extra vav in the Torah or a letter. And the Gemara darshans for a half an amid that one letter, because the Torah was very concise with every word and every letter. And here by Eliezer, the whole story, and then goes and repeats it for another 10 psukim, reviews it and keep. Because Eliezer thought that now that he found the shidduch, and it wasn't going to be his daughter, that he went out of the category of cursed into the category of baruch, because of his simcha for somebody else. You know, unfortunately, we should never be tested. Someone, let's say, who is 32 years old, and they're looking for 10 years for a shidduch, and they haven't found the shidduch, and their best friend gets engaged. And they come to the l'chaim, mazel tov, and they dance, and they drink l'chaim, and they're happy. And that's how they should be. And no one should ever be tested. But it could be they go home and begin to cry. Why again? I'm not engaged yet. I'm still not married. And I'm happy for my friend. But the happiness wasn't 100%. Because you came home and you cried, because you're so down that you haven't found your shidduch yet. But Eliezer came back afterwards. The machshava never after that came into his mind about his daughter again. That it was 100% simcha, and with simcha you can go from the category of being cursed into the category of being blessed. And that's how we should go from item to item, to first work on ourselves that we mean what we say, and that we should express what our true feeling is, and we should always push it into the positive arena. Because once it is in the area of simcha, then the limitless response from Shemayim comes to town. And I have been at many chasnas where the chassan was 35 and the kala was 32. And when they found their bar shelter, the happiness level was like you never saw before. That all the trudging through the shidduchim, and they have today these you have to send a letter with your history and with who they should call and who they should references and that. When I was in yeshiva, I never heard of one. I was the Gabbai in the Bais Medrash, 600 boys. I never heard of one doing a shidduch that they had to go for an I mean, they went out on a date, and some went on for 10 dates and 20 dates. They weren't sure. And I'm not sure they were sure even after they got engaged. But the point being that they did what they could, but there was no such thing as giving a resume as if you're applying for a job. But with everything, we have to bring out true simcha for somebody else, even when we are deficient in an area or we're wanting in an area. And that simcha, if a person can overcome his human dimension, and as I said twice already tonight, we should never be tested. That dimension and go into the realm of simcha, then he will see how it is bestowed on him, what he needs, what he's missing, where he's going, and how he has to overcome it in every single which way. Now, Avram Avinu lived his 170 years, and it says, Asher Chai, which he lived. And the only other place in the Torah that expression, Asher Chai, is used is by Adam Arishon, because Adam Arishon was supposed to live 1,000 years, and he saw that David HaMelech was going to be born dead. So he gave 70 years of his life to David HaMelech, and that's why it says Asher Chai. And by Avram Avinu, as I mentioned last week, was supposed to live 170. He was supposed to live 180 years. And it was brought back to 175 because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had Rachmanis on him that he shouldn't have to see how Yishmael went Latarbus Ra, out to such negative, terrible behavior and become a saddened Zayda to witness that. So he died 5 years early, but he was supposed to live to 180, and that's why it says Asher Chai, because he didn't live to his designated years in any which way. Now you'll ask me a question. So why by Yaakov Avinu, who was supposed to also live 180 years and he only lived 147, why doesn't it say Asher Chai? So the Meforshim answer, because it doesn't say Vayomas by Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, it just says Vayigva Vayei Osef. But like by Yitzchok or by Avram Avinu, it says Vayigva Vayomas. Vayei Osef El Amav. It doesn't say Vayomas by Yaakov Avinu. And the Torah, Rashi brings it, the Gemara talks about it, that Mikan she Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Now whenever it says lo meis, like it says by David HaMelech's father Yishai, and it says by Serach bas Osher, it doesn't mean that they're still walking around. Because Yaakov Avinu is buried in Moritz HaMachpelah. Yaakov and Leah. But it means, you see, when a person is nifter, as the Arizal brings, there's a process. When the neshama just leaves the body, we have to say Tilim. That protects from the Mekatrigim, the Averis that he did in his lifetime, protects from those Malachim that were created who want to attack him. The Tilim protects him. Then after the Kvura, it's the Kaddish, the Yehei Shmei Rabbah, and the Mishnayos that we learn that protect him. But if a person zoicha that the Torah says he didn't die, it means he didn't have to go through any of the process that a regular person, the neshama leaves, and then he goes from A to B to C, and it's painful. So someone that's Asher Chai, like Yaakov Avinu, he skipped that whole line and he went straight to Gan Eden Ha'elyon, not with an inch or an item or an iota of any type of tsar. And the Arizal Taka says that if somebody is zoicha to be buried on Erev Shabbos, Friday, after Chatzos, that he doesn't go through the chibut hakever, one of those very painful processes before the actual burial, and then at the time of the burial. He goes in scot-free, but you're not allowed to wait for a levaya chas v'sholom, because that alone is tsar for the neshama. So we try to bury as quickly as we can. And if that comes out Erev Shabbos, then Friday, after Chatzos, that's when the Oren is put into the ground, he has no chibut hakever. But the main thing that we should leave with this Sedra is that when it comes to the lives of tzaddikim, that we live forever with the Sipuri Chasidim, with the Gemara that brings down how Tanoim, how Amoroim, how Tzaddikim, how Go'oinim, Rishonim, Achroinim, how they all lived their lives with such Mesiras Nefesh that they paved the way with the imagery, without the oil painting. But they showed us a picturesque, lavish, lovely landscaping, lush landscaping, paving the way for how a Yid should go through life, even in moments of tragedy, even in moments of challenge, to be able to have the wholesomeness of how a Yid lives in Olam Hazeh, with all of the trials and tribulations that come his way. And I hope that we should be able, without the trials and tribulation, and if we had to go through it, we've all gone through enough of the trials and tribulations to be zoiche to the Geula Shalema.